want to talk to you today about not only, well, really about cultural competence. Oh, maybe I should share my screen. How about that? And share a little bit more about myself. I am a senior lecturer at EMU in the College of Business Management Department. I do run my own organization. It's called the Institute for Culture, Change, and Leadership. And I'm the co-chair of the Professional Development and Ethics Committee at the College of Business. And I am working on two books right now. The first one is You Can Get a Kick a double job, no matter your age. So, and I'm really trying to impress upon hopefully some students as well as people, others who read it, that networking is the key, right? Networking is really the key to getting that job that you want. And I want to encourage you today, as I do this presentation, if you have a question, I can't, for some reason, I can't see the chat when I do this. So if somebody has a question, feel free to just give a holler out, or if somebody can see a chat that, that they want to ask a question. It's really important to me that if you have a question or comment, it's kind of a real-time situation, because I just think sometimes after the fact, it's not as meaningful. I was on
Doc,
a, yes,
Dr. Barker,
yes.
Riley and I will monitor the chat for you, so you
Okay.
can kind of focus on lecturing, and we'll let you know if we see any
Okay.
questions pop in. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. I was on an amazing chat this morning. It's a program that we have been working with the William Davidson Institute through the University of Michigan. And it's a consortium of EMU, U of M, MSU, Wayne State, and I think U of M Dearborn, along with probably half of that is in North Africa. And the lecturer today was a gentleman from U of M, and he said leadership is very much about managing differences. And I wanted to stand up and go, yes. And then he said, delegate, but stay visible and be positive. Nobody wants to work with a negative Nelly or a negative Ned, right? So I told you all that stuff about myself. So we'll keep on. Oh, but one thing I forgot to tell you, I have three grown children, and two of my youngest graduated from Eastern Michigan University December 14th, 2025. So all three of my children are college graduates, and I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of the fact that they are, partly because I was the first one in my family to graduate. Many have since graduated, but I was the first one to graduate at each of those for each degree, and so I like to think that I don't know, maybe I had a little effect on them or something. So go Eagles, right? But I want to ask you, okay. Today we are going to look at strengthening your leadership toolkit, okay, with actionable strategies. We're going to deepen your understanding of how culture impacts everything we do. And we're going to gain tools to reconcile dilemmas and create a sense of belonging in organizations. And to me, that's where the rubber hits the road. How can we look at situations that come up, differences, and how can we make them win-win situations? I call it win-win-win. So it's a win for you, it's a win for me, and it's a win for the community. So I want to ask you, as we get started here, who can tell me what is the definition of the word culture? It's kind of a big word. How would you define culture? So I think, if you Google culture, there's many definitions. Did somebody have one?
Lu- I think Lucy, did you have something you want to say?
Yes, I just had to figure out how to unmute here. I'm not the most technologically savvy, sorry.
That's all right.
I would say that a definition of culture is just the community you're in, and it also involves the types of things that make that community unique and make it work together.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful, wonderful definition. I always say it's why we do what we do, right? And I think this is one of my favorite quotes by Paul Bohannon, who wrote the book, How Culture Works. And he says people are subject to constraints that arise from the rules of matter, the rules of life, the rules of culture. So, culture transcends and enriches matter and life. And so, especially in organizations, right? A lot of times, an organization will have a culture, and then different departments will have different cultures, right? And then there can even be subcultures beyond that, which makes it very interesting. Who can tell me what is cultural competence?
Would it
I think we have,
be,
I
oh,
think,
I'm
oh,
sorry.
I was just going to say, I think we have a raised hand, Leah.
But so I think cultural competence is like understanding like other cultures that you like aren't necessarily a part of or even just like your own like before like going into a different culture like having like a certain knowledge that would be like, respectful and
You
like
guys are spot on. That is spot on. Being able to adapt in any situation, right? Making people feel comfortable. That to me, that is what cultural competence is all about. And as children, we learn to operate in different cultures, right? In our family, in our schools, in our peers, in our communities. I remember in fifth grade, I transferred to a new school. And I really can't believe I'm sharing this story, but I had to use the restroom. And so I just got up and used the restroom. And the teacher followed me outside and I mean, outside just the classroom part. And he says, "Well, where are you going, young lady?" And I said, "Well, I have to use the restroom." And he said, "Well, you have to get a pass." And I didn't know anything about that, right? So I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I went and, went back in and got the pass. And, but it was something I wasn't told. So I had to learn, from that situation. As our world expands, we become exposed to people who are different from us. We learn to interact with different people. We enter this new aspect of cultural competence, or as some call it, cultural intelligence. And I'm going to do a double negative here and say in today's global society, it is simply unacceptable to not be culturally competent, right? We live in a diverse, very diverse world. We were talking at the beginning of this get together today about, some of the advantages for living in Eastern or Southeast Michigan. And I'm a huge foodie, so that's one big advantage. But also, I love the diversity, right? We have so much diversity, and a lot of that we have to thank the auto industry for. But the goal is to create connection in our world where we can all feel included and we can all feel that we belong. So it's really important to understand that we don't all view culture in the same way. There is culture relativity out there, which means some people have different beliefs, right? Some people have different beliefs than your own as it relates to culture. We also, I think it's important to have a holistic approach when we talk about culture. Culture should be looked at from its origins, which is sociological, anthropological, psychological, management, leadership, and business, right? And it's also important to understand that we all have cultural baggage and predispositions. And whether we want to admit it or not, we all do have some kind of predispositions when it comes to culture. And it's good to know that. It's good to know yourself when you're going into situations. That
All
was
right, there
wonderful.
we go.
Okay, so yeah, so here's my first slide, my second, the things that we would go through today. What is culture? Um, what is cultural competence? And let me see if I can.
Yeah, do it as a slideshow.
Okay,
There we go.
so thank you so much for saying something. So, it's just really important that we set up this environment where everyone feels like they can belong. And Dr. Amy Edmondson from Harvard, really coined this term, psychological safety. And it's where members feel, first they feel included. They're like, I belong here. Then, okay, I can ask some questions. Then you're contributing, and then you can be challenging, right? You can be bold and you can speak out. And that is just really important, not from a disrespectful not standpoint, but from a perspective where you are a contributing member of the team. And I think leadership has changed so much, and that it's a leader's job to harness suggestions that come up and to make them, apply the ones that make sense for the team, but to really listen to everybody and every idea. We have a new dean in the College of Business, Dean Amy, and she did a listening tour when she first started, and she went around and she wanted ideas and she wanted thoughts, and she's still kind of doing this listening tour, but she wants to make sure she communicates with everyone. And that doesn't mean that every idea that comes her way, she's going to be able to accomplish, but it means that she can pick and choose, and she has a full basket, a full array of things to choose. The other thing I really wanted to share, and I shared this in my class earlier today, is a lot of us, I'm sure, know Tuckman's stages of team formation, right? You have the forming, and then the storming, where everybody hashes everything out, and then the norming, where people kind of, you know, say, okay, this is my job. And then the performing, where you get the job done. And then the adjourning, where people celebrate the accomplishments. I would like to propose that 50% of your time should be spent in the forming and adjourning stages. If you do not set yourself up for success from the beginning, you're going to pay for it down the line. So I want to encourage you, when you are in a team, and I think I have a great, team contract that people can use if anybody, wants me to send it or something. But I mean, you can Google team contracts too. I mean, there's a million of them out there, but what are you good at? Get to know each other, right? What do you like to do? Um, who should be the leader? That doesn't mean they should be, autocratic, but there are certain people that are natural born leaders. And I'm thinking back. I'm sorry, Jana. I'm thinking back to your end of semester project, and you were the natural born leader for the team. I think you had some inside knowledge, which of course was helpful as well, but you kept the team on track. You kept everybody on track and engaged. And I think that that is really, really important. So please set yourself up for success. Uh, 50% on forming, 50%, a total of 50% on adjourning. Celebrate your successes, right? A lot of times when teams are done, they're like, oh, okay, we're done. Okay, well, what did you do? What did your team accomplish? Should you have a potluck? Should you, have a session where you all shared what you learned? A lot of different, you can celebrate a lot of different ways, but again, it brings people together. It kind of closes it out. And I have seen so many teams have to go back to, they were at norming or performing and they had to go all the way back to the beginning, right? Because they didn't spend that time. I've been on a lot of teams. Hey, oh yeah, what's your name? Okay, what do you want to do? Okay, let's get down to business, right? That's not what we're talking about. Doing maybe a little icebreaker, really getting to know each other a little better, I think can be really, really powerful and create meaningful difference in your team. Cultural competence. Fons Trompenaars, which is one of my heroes. I am certified through the Trompenaars Hampton Turner um, cultural team. And one of their sayings is culture is not a side dish, it's the main course. A lot of managers think, oh, they just want to put culture like in a little box off to the side, right? And I want to say culture should be kind of the platter, right? The platter you're serving the meal on. Culture influences employees' behaviors, good and bad. New employees learn. Oh my goodness, they learn so much from observing, right? And customer service is directly related to workplace culture. Okay. I kind of view cultural competence as similar to a a flight simulator, right? So, when well, if you were flying a plane, right, you would, be looking all the time, scanning, right? Different landscapes, different situations, and then you adapt, right? You adapt, but the conditions are always varying. And I think that that's really important when you're looking at culture because things do, vary from time to time when you're looking at culture. And I do want to say that whenever you are in a new cultural situation, I think it's important to not only do your research, right? But it's also important, like let's say you're going overseas for a business matter. I think it's important to bring somebody with you, right? Bring somebody, a cultural um, partner, right? Someone who can tell you. I mean, sometimes it's the little things that can make the biggest deal and really make people decide whether they want to deal with you or not. Um, there have been situations where and I kind of forget about it in the US, but overseas where maybe sometimes being female leading a project, um, it might not, the team overseas, the female might not get as much respect as they would in the US. So, one thing, what can a woman do when she's in that situation? Um, it kind of depends on what your goals are. So, one thing she could do is, bring maybe a male partner to help her. We'll talk about all that stuff, but really doing your research and finding out how can I be most successful in this endeavor, I think is really, really important because dilemmas come up all the time, right? We all have dilemmas. People have different cultural values related to a situation, and we're going to look at a few. But how do you take those dilemmas and turn them into win-win-win situations? So, dilemmas can be observed in any human interaction. They can be brought out in meetings, managing and leading, different, potential conflicts. I said to my class, or I've said to all my classes this semester is I want you to challenge me. If you don't think something I say is right on or whatever, I want to hear from you, right? How can we make it better? I think it's really important that we be able to share and create that environment of psychological safety. But when we talk about what is reconciling a dilemma, this is one of my favorite stories. And I had a coworker, and she had two girls in college, and they were both coming home for break, college break. And she was standing in the kitchen one day, and both of the girls come running in, right? And they both put their hands on the orange in the fruit bowl, and there was only one orange. And my friend just sat and thought for a second, and asked each daughter, well, what are your goals? Now, I always believe in being prepared. So, maybe it would have been nice to have to fill the fruit bowl beforehand or whatever, but things happen, right? So she took some time and she asked the gals what their goals were. And the first one had just worked out. And so she wanted to eat the orange. The other one was going to be making a recipe later today. And so she wanted the orange rind. So by the mom just asking a few questions, she was able to take that situation and create a win-win-win situation. Now, she could have said, okay, I'm sorry, there's one orange in the orange bowl and I'm cutting it in half. Each of you get half. Well, I mean, they probably could have lived with that situation, but it wasn't the ideal situation, right? It would not have been the ideal situation. So asking questions and listening is really, really a key part in reconciling dilemmas. So uh, we are in an era of rapid and constant change, right? Diversity is everywhere. There's ethnocentrism and biases out there. But the bottom line is magic bullets come and go, however, problems remain. And I chose this visual because I just thought the guy was, he's just out there gunslinging, right? And he's not really sure, or at least it appears to me, he's not really sure, what's going on, but he's got his gun, so he's ready, right? So I think it's really important to go into these situations as an observer and a questioner, and to really find out how you can create win-win-win situations. So um, before we get into some of the meat of it, of this, I want to recognize that you can manage, measure, and change culture, right? First, we recognize the importance of culture to groups, organizations, nations, and humans in general. We recognize that professionals often have different cultures and subcultures. And what I'd like to introduce you to today is Trompenaars' 7 dimensions of culture model. And this is where we recognize, we respect, we reconcile, and then we realize the effects of what we have done in our work. So I'm going to just put these up here real quick, but we do have a slide for each of these. And oops, when the first one, universal versus particular, rules or relationship. The second one, individual versus collective, right? What's more important, self or society? When Mayor Mondami was recently inaugurated into his position, he kept saying collective, and everybody was like, oh, collective is bad. Collective is not bad. It's just the change of the emphasis from the person to the group, right? And in many ways, that can be a good thing. Although in the US, we are among the most individualistic cultures out there. Achievement versus description, who you are versus what you do, specific versus diffuse. Are you, how open are you in situations? Neutral versus effective, how much do you show emotion? This is my favorite, synchronic versus sequential. Time, the impact of time on your cultural beliefs. And then internal versus external, who controls our fate. I really want to encourage you. I know this is a really busy slide. Kind of look at the top here and look at, okay, typical universalistic cultures where the rules apply to everyone. US, Canada, UK, Netherlands, Germany, Scandinavia, New Zealand, Australia, and Switzerland. These are by no means complete lists, right? But these are just some examples of countries that, how many times have you heard the rules apply to everyone? Typical particularistic cultures include Russia, Latin America, China. I'm sure there's many other areas. And that says that people believe that each circumstance and each relationship dictates the rules that they live by, right? So the response to a situation may change based on what's happening in the moment and who's involved. So that's very much different than the rules apply to everyone. The second one, individualism versus, oh, this word communitarianism. It's just the same as collectivism, the individual versus the group. Typical individualistic cultures, US, Canada, UK, Scandinavia, New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland. Typical collectivist cultures, Latin America, Africa, Japan. I would say there are many others. There's parts of, oh, it says Africa up there, parts of the Middle East as well. Also, some parts in Asia where people believe that the group is more important than the individual. The group provides help and safety in exchange for loyalty. Okay. And the group takes care of the individual. And, I had the privilege of spending some time in the Pacific region of the world, and they are very collectivist. And, there's Samoa, there's the Marshall Islands, there's Tonga, there's all these islands. And even Hawaii is very collectivist in their orientation. And so you don't praise or you don't call out individuals publicly. I have seen like chiefs of villages get called out publicly in meetings, and they're just kind of mortified, right? I mean, it's not how their cultures typically work. And so I think it's really important to be aware of that. Specific versus diffuse, how far people get involved. So again, typical specific cultures, US, UK, lots of European countries, right? Typical diffuse cultures, Argentina, Spain, Russia, India, China. What is a specific culture? That's where people keep their work and personal lives separate, right? There's a line that shall not be crossed, right? In diffuse cultures, people see an overlap between their work and personal life. They believe that good relationships are vital to meeting business objectives and that their relationships with others will be the same, whether they're at work or meeting socially. So, someone in your office is painting their garage this weekend. Well, hopefully not this time of year, but maybe in the spring. And they throw it out there and people come over and help them paint the garage, right? Even the boss feels comfortable in asking people to come over and help because they're in a diffuse culture. Neutral versus emotional. Typical neutral cultures, again, I would say US, UK, Sweden, Netherlands, Finland, Germany. We have the whole, or the old poker face, right, that we're supposed to do in the US, which is not something I'm very good at. I would say that I would thrive much more in an emotional culture, which would be Italy, France, Spain, and countries in Latin America, where it's expected that they pound on the table, right? They get excited. And, I'm learning as I go along. As I get older, I'm learning how to, be a little bit more neutral in my orientation, in my emotions, in my body language. But yeah, it's something I always have to work on. Achievement versus ascription. So we believe, many, folks from the US, you are what you accomplish, right? So your worth is, based on good performance, and people use titles only when relevant. In ascriptive societies, people believe you should be valued for who you are. Many times people are born into titles, right? Power, titles, position matter in these cultures, and they really define behavior. So um, don't show up, people in authority, right? Use titles when you're talking to people. It's kind of a bit more of a formal environment. And then this is my favorite, sequential versus synchronic. So how people manage time. Sequential, time is money. Be punctual. Keep to the deadlines, right? Set clear deadlines. Again, sequential, Germany, UK, US, typical synchronic cultures, Japan, Argentina, Mexico. There's a whole lot of other places. I would say parts of Africa, parts of the Middle East. People see the past, present, and future as interwoven periods. They often work on several projects at once, and they view plans and commitments as flexible. So it's okay if you're a half hour late, right? So long as you are being productive. And then the last one is our internal direction versus outer direction. So how people relate to their environment. Um, an internal direction, it's kind of like being individualistic, right? You are over, you control your environment to achieve your goals. And an external direction or locus of control, it's not your world, you're just living in it, right? And you follow the rules. And, I think of Hawaii a lot of times with this because, you have paradise, right? And people operate within that environment and they try not to harm that. And, that's why there's no billboards there or things like that, right? So that it truly does feel like paradise. But when I'm running late, I always say, my orientation is synchronic today. And people just say, yeah, whatever.
Dr. Barker,
Yes.
we had a question in the chat.
Uh-huh.
Um, with the rise of AI assistants in the workplace, especially in
Mm.
customer service type roles, I found it much harder to reach out to people for even simple conversations in work environment or otherwise. Now more now than even 5 years ago. How should I go about creating a healthy culture in the communities I'm part of despite this?
Mm. I really like that. That is a great question. I think,
And the Lucy who asked the question said she's happy to clarify any further if you have follow-up questions. If you have questions about her
yeah,
question.
yeah, I think asking people for their time, right? Hey, do you have some time at 10 o'clock today? Or can we have a team huddle this morning, before we start work? Being very intentional about it, I think, is really important, not just hey, can you meet right now, kind of a thing. I think that could make a big difference in this. What do you think, Lucy? Are you there? Or anyone else? Do you have any suggestions? Any other suggestions besides being intentional, being proactive, trying to set forth the time so that you can have these important conversations?
I think that it's sometimes it's important to set aside those dates and times to specifically reach out to people or to um like talk to people in your community because of the fact that people are so especially in our culture it's all about business and being productive that people a lot of times are super have a super packed schedule. So to make connection it's you have to be very intentional about it.
Yes, I would agree. And, however it works for within your team. We used to have morning huddles, right? And so with my team, we'd have a huddle in the morning and then we'd have a huddle later in the day where we would come together, okay, what's worked well? What have we accomplished? Things like that. And always on Monday, I'd have kind of two rounds. I've had, okay, what did you do fun this weekend? Because everybody would want to, all they'd want to do is talk about the weekend, right? And then after that, let's get down to business. And I think everybody just kind of left. We had that 10 to 15-minute period where everybody felt connected. They felt clear on what the goals were and what they wanted to accomplish. So I think, yeah, it's being very intentional and
Yeah. Great. Thanks so much.
yes. So here are some examples of dilemmas from our world today. The group versus individual, face-to-face teaching versus virtual education, quality versus quantity, downsizing versus growth, unsustainable growth versus environmental issues, short-term versus long-term. We were talking in one of my classes today, org theory and behavior. How can you downsize? Right? How can you downsize an organization without sending out a bunch of pink slips? Right? Organizations, they grow and they contract, right? It's just part of life. So, this was several years ago now, but my sister's husband worked for a very large international company on the west side of the state. I won't name it. But 2 weeks before Christmas, 200 people got a pink slip and 2 weeks severance. They say it takes an organization about 12 years to recover from something like that, from their branding, from their marketing, from all of these, issues, from word of mouth, things like that. So that was a very stressful holiday season for them. And, dad had to go out and, a lot of times they're not hiring during the holidays. And so we were like, how could you deal with a, how could you reduce the full-time equivalents or the payroll? How could you reduce the payroll without having to send out a bunch of pink slips? And one suggestion was when someone quits, you don't fill that position, right? You reallocate the work. Another suggestion was, does anybody want time off without pay? It always seems like there's someone out there who says, I want time off and I don't care whether I get paid or not. It's never me, but there's usually someone out there who says that. So, whatever, do they want to do a cruise around the world or whatever they want to do? To give them the time off without pay, right? Um, some people might want to take like a Thursday afternoon off, right? A few hours without pay every week. There's ways you can get creative where you can create. I mean, it's sad that you have to cut back a little bit, but how can you spread the wealth, so to speak, and so that everyone can have a little bit more. Can you think of any dilemmas? One person said, just have less employees because of AI. You don't need as many employees. Don't hire as many. I thought, well, that's certainly a good start. Yes, Andrea or Andrea.
The first one. I think like personal life versus work demands.
Absolutely. Very. And you will find, and And Andrea, Andrea has been in my class as well, so I can attest to her good work as well. And there's a lot of bosses out there. They're like, hey, I'm not worried about your personal life. All I want is the job done, right? And whether you have a personal life isn't a concern of mine. And that is definitely a dilemma. So I wrote a paper, actually. It was published January 17th, 2024. And we have a follow-up paper that's being peer reviewed at this time. The first paper was Communication and Cultural Strategies Impacting Ukrainian Refugees and Others Involved. What I did is I looked at, well, there were three of us on the paper, but we looked at the 5 countries that most Ukrainian refugees were going to. And they were Germany, US, UK, the Czech Republic, and Poland. And then I took each of those 7 dimensions and I compared them. Now, I had to make some generalizations. It was easy to do based on the Trompenaars website. They had some pre-existing data, which allowed me to make some uh, educated assumptions. But we look at the second one down, the individualism versus collectivism focus. Ukraine, which is the blue and yellow, is very, very group focused. Look at the 5 other countries. There we are, the US, the most individualistic, right? And then there's the UK, and then there's Germany, and then there's Poland, and then there's the Czech Republic. So a lot of these countries are right around each other, right? And there's still a lot of differences, right? That a lot of these people that were hosting the refugees, should consider. And it was really, really, it was just a phenomenal experience to work on this paper. And the second one, it was a lot more more depressing. It was very sad because this conflict has just gone on way too long. But there's still the impact of the protracted conflict in Ukraine and how these people, a lot of these people are still in these situations, right? And there's a lot of mothers and families that are having to adjust their families. They still want to go back to Ukraine someday, right? But they're having to stay somewhere else, in the meantime, and probably will have to for some time after the war ends. So I thought this was kind of a cool visual of, each of these dimensions and how, on a scale, they can a lot of them can be. Very rarely is one bipolar, right? So, like, very rarely would one be all the way to the individualistic, and one would be all the way to the group focus, right? They're somewhere in the middle, but but there are definitely some trends to look at. And the other one that I really, really like is the time one. So, looking at the time one, again, Ukraine here in the yellow is very into the synchronic multitasking, right? Whereas the Czech Republic is maybe, somewhere kind of in the middle. And then there's the US, and then there's the UK, and then there's Poland and Germany. Germany is time is money, right? Get things done, get the agenda. And I do think we might be a little further, closer to Germany than the States. But again, that's a big difference, right? When you are dealing with somebody from Ukraine, to understand their orientation and where they're coming from. So here's a couple of examples, and I'm going to ask you to put your thinking caps on. So I'm going to ask for some feedback. There's a new teacher in a high school, and she's developing a teaching plan for her class, and she's considering how much focus to put on the individual and group assignments and grading. She realizes that many of the students are from collective, group-oriented families and communities. However, the school system uses a much more individualistic approach to learning and assessment. Standardized individual tests and individual learning is the focus. But she wants to be the best teacher possible. How could she reconcile this dilemma so that she could work with students more successfully? Does anyone have any ideas? Yes, Elizabeth.
Hi, sorry, I can't turn on my camera right now. But my idea was, one of the things that she could do is she could have some uh, projects be group projects and some projects be individual projects, and then have another handful of projects where students are allowed to work in the group, but they all have to fill out their own individual paper.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Right? Now, she has every right to be like, hey, you're in the US and we're going to do it this way. And, we're all individualistic here, but she really wants to get through to these students. So how can she work together with them so that you can reward the work of the groups, right? Or the individuals within groups. And that is so important. On the one hand, we recognize the value of individual assessment and learning, and we understand the bias, right, of the school system, the way they've always done things. On the other hand, we recognize the value of group learning, particularly with some of these students, and group learning will fit the style of the students. So that's a dilemma, individual versus group. So how can you come together and create that win-win-win situation? Here's another one. I love this one. A social worker has been assigned to a male, age 15, by the juvenile court. This one happens to be Hispanic. These are all real cases. He has been absent from school for 1 month. And when she makes a home visit to meet the family, she is unable to discuss the situation because the family can't speak any English. And she has minimal Spanish fluency. She also notices that the father does not appear to listen to her or even respond to her. So this is a cultural dilemma involving achievement ascription and individual collectivist values. Now, I would first say, I would think the social worker may have wanted to do some of her research ahead of time. But, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know what you're going to face when you get into that situation. And so when she decides to go back again, what should she do? Any suggestions?
Quick question before I answer.
Yes.
In this scenario, does she have any Spanish speaking coworkers?
Well, we will make the assumption that yes, she does.
Okay. If she does, then I think that she could the have the Spanish speaking coworker come over, or they could work together and come to the house together. And so
That is so good, Lucy.
it can it can work almost like so the coworker can A, almost work like an interpreter, and B, give the student a little bit more of a voice within their culture. But the large problem in the large problem especially in America is there are some offices, you don't have a coworker that can speak every single language.
Right.
And so it's hard to find,
Yes.
which is why I asked.
Yes. Leah, did you have a question or comment?
I was also thinking that like potentially it could be like a culture like thing where like the father isn't like is kind of like showing some disrespect and not really like listening to the social worker. So
Mhm.
maybe like the translator could be like a male that maybe more so he might like show more respect or at least like give more attention to or like take her
Yep.
more seriously as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wouldn't it be good if that Spanish speaking coworker was male? Wouldn't that be a great thing? So again, you have to think about what are your goals in this situation. I mean, she could go in there, she could say, hey, listen, this is the way it is, right? You're in America and your son needs to be in school. And if not, you might have to go to court. Well, yeah, I mean, yes, that is all true, right? But what are your goals in this situation? That's what you have to look at. Was there another comment that someone wanted to make?
I was going to say as well, she could bring like a diagram of different like emotions or key translated words so
Hmm.
that they could try communicating that way because
Yeah,
often the root of a problem isn't always something that you can necessarily describe, but using nonverbal communication and context can help get to the bottom of why something is happening.
absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? Anything you can do to help. Now, I have this is just like a little template. It's usually on a piece of paper where you can fill it out. You can say, who are the stakeholders? What are the cultural orientations? What are the positions? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each side? What are some of the proposed solutions? But this is the thing that gets me excited and wakes me up in the morning is the genius of the and, right? How can we take the competing values and put them together so that it can be a win-win situation? And how can you implement that, right? Sometimes, it's a multiple step process, but this is one way you can like kind of work through issues like that. This next one, again, a sequential synchronic, one of my favorites. There was a USAID worker who was assigned to work with a local village. He's scheduled to meet with the local village mayor. This happens to be in Africa. And he arrives at the meeting and he's the only one there. He showed up on time and he's the only one there. He's not pleased after all because he's there to help them. The mayor comes in, he rolls in maybe an hour late, doesn't seem to apologize, seems to be constantly distracted. And I want to say this is when it's always important to have a book. It's always important to have a good book in case you are given the gift of time, or a journal that you can write in, that you can plan things in and go from there. But should this person tell the mayor that he expects the meetings to begin on time and that there should be a clear agenda? Or should he just let it go? Yes, Elizabeth.
I don't think either exactly. He shouldn't just let it go. Like communicating about the issue is probably the
Hmm.
best part. Explaining, hey, when you say that the meeting is at this time, I I arrive at that time because I don't like being late. If you can give me a more accurate window, is it would it be all right if I showed up an hour after the time we say?
Right.
Like, and come
Maybe,
to a
yeah.
compromise.
Yeah, set some guiding principles, right? For your meetings, right? How are you going to Run your meetings, right? Is it okay if everyone is like within a half hour, right? Time frame, or try to be within that, or 15 minutes. And, how are you going to set up the items to discuss? Things like that. Really be proactive about that so that it can be a win-win for both. I mean, this person is trying to work with them and teach them things, but he's a mayor. He has a city to run, right? So we need to have a clear agenda. We need to have successful meetings, but we also have to respect local cultures. And not every culture is linear in the way they get things done, right? So he did. That's what he did. He set up a one-on-one meeting with the mayor, and together they set norms for meeting attendance and agendas. And everything went swimmingly after that. So, okay, I think this is the last one. This is a Caribbean nation is getting negative comments and exit surveys because the tourists, as they depart, they say the staff at this international hotel is unfriendly, they're rude, and after further investigation, it's discovered that the locals are raised not to look at their parents when they're being scolded. So the visitors, mainly from the USA, are taught to look at their parents when they're scolding them, right? So these visitors are complaining and the staff are looking away. And then the guests get more upset, right? Because they're avoiding their eye contact. So the behavior makes the guests, again, more upset, and they interpret the locals to be rude. How could this? Yes, Anna. How could this be resolved?
I think what you mentioned earlier about like doing your research is important and like all the little things. If you're traveling to a country where the culture might be different, it's important to even like I think I've been told that like when you're dining in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
um, like the dining process is different.
Yeah,
And so just being mindful of like the little things, the language, so like on the tourist part being
yeah.
prepared, doing the research.
I think that is a great, great answer. Andrea.
Um, I would want to do this one on the flip side, actually, and I think the cultural competence and adjustment should come from the staff because it's just a level of customer service. Like
Yeah,
ultimately,
uh,
your goal is to cater to the guests.
they are an international hotel, right? They're having visitors from all over the world. So, yeah, I think, there's really no right or wrong, but I think it could be attacked from different angles, right? And sometimes I think, there could be like little signs in the buses that bring people, and maybe explain cute little cultural things or something, things like that that could help people understand it a little bit more. Uh, the other thing is, why do people need to be so rude, right? I mean, yeah, we were talking about this today. This was several years ago, and I went to a restaurant in town, and I ordered, and they've shored up their processes much better now, but they forgot the fries, and these weren't $2 fries. So, I called and I left a message and I said, my name's Kim Barker, and I love your restaurant. I just next time I come, could you like keep my name so that I could like get my fries next time I come? That's really all I want. And that'll be within the next few days because I love your restaurant so much. And when I went in and of course they called me. And when I went in, the store manager was like, "Oh my gosh, that was the nicest customer complaint I have ever gotten." And I was like, "Oh, okay, thank you." but sometimes people, if something doesn't go their way, they just have to get all ornery. And my mother always taught me you attract more bees with honey than with vinegar, right? So you want to, be kind and respectful to people. And maybe they don't need to look away so much. So we're coming down towards the end, but I just really want to kind of relay that culture is important to all professions, and it's important um, with culturally diverse participants. I think the Trompenaars 7 dimensions of culture really kind of help you understand and assess culture and change it. I learned this from one of my professors in college, and it was from when I got my master's. And he has since passed away, but he did consulting all over the world. And he identified with the Australian Air Force. There were much more. They identified many dilemmas, but they took the top 44 and they went through and they worked through each of the top 44 with the Australian Air Force. And it was a situation that really helped them, change their culture for the better. So, one of my favorite quotes is in the beginning, I had only had the red and the yellow. Diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And recently, Verna Myers has added, but belonging is dancing like no one is watching. And so I think this is something that I did a TEDx talk this summer, and my title of my talk was Why Cultural Competence Should Be the New DEI. And in my talk, I said, I think we need to take the base of what DEI gave us and we need to turn it up a notch, right? It's not just about being diverse, it's about being inclusive, it's about creating that sense of belonging, where everyone feels like they have psychological safety. And I just love that. I think it's so important. And I recommend if you get a chance to check out my TEDx talk. And of course, I always like likes and comments. Comments are my favorite. So um, here's an example, and this was from last year. This was a major company, and they had requirements for a summer internship. Foundational to inclusion and diversity, we strongly encourage students to identify with a group that is historically underrepresented, including but not limited to Black, African American, Hispanic, Latinx, American Indian, students with disabilities, and veterans to apply. And I was like, it made me sad when I read that. I thought, well, I can't apply. Well, I couldn't apply. I couldn't apply anyway, right? But I just felt excluded. So I thought, how could this be rewritten? All are welcome to apply. And we especially encourage students who identify with a group that is historically underrepresented, including veterans, those with disabilities to apply. So again, it's not, it's and you can have your goals, right? Your objectives. They're very clear, when you're looking at applications, but you want them to feel like anyone is welcome to apply. And so I think there's just nicer ways to put things, and you're not wasting time. You may, when you're going through the applications and things like that, there may be people that you hadn't thought of including, right? That might be a great addition to the internship. So it's really about thinking about how can you reframe this in a way that's more positive and more inclusive. I want to encourage you. I have a YouTube page that's pretty active, and I have a lot of talks on there about how can you live your best life at work. That's what my whole mission is I want people to live their lives at work in a way that it's meaningful and useful and they feel like they're making a difference. The other thing is my playlists happen to be all of the videos I use for my classes and probably a few more as well. But so I do think that I have some really good videos on there. One of my favorites, and I was telling my classes today, is it's by Jeffrey Pfeffer, and he was a tenure track faculty member from Stanford. And the title of the talk is Power: How to Get It, Use It, and Keep It. And he talks in that talk about volunteering, being the one when they say, we need somebody to do this. And, there's usually some people that are like, oh, I didn't go to school for that, whatever. And being the one to raise your hand and being like, I'll take care of that problem for you, right? Being the one that is helpful, takes that extra initiative. Say, hey, I'll go pick up this person from the airport. I can spend an extra half hour one-on-one with the speaker, right? And that's a huge bonus in addition to the boss being grateful that you are willing to do it. So anyway, I just would like to encourage you to check out that. I also, in addition to the book, You Can Create Positive Change at Work, I have a workbook that I've created, and it has 10 cases and 2 simulations that we do in a class that I teach. And it really delves into this a lot further if you're interested. And
we have a question.
Oh, yes, yes.
We have a question. Has there, and I think we really need to move on to questions because we're running short on time.
Yep.
So the question is, has there ever been a time when you thought people were going too far to be inclusive?
Wow. Such good questions. And I would say no. I have not experienced that. Have any of you experienced that?
Does anyone else have any questions for our speaker? Because we're running short on time. We probably have time for 1 or 2. Do you have any questions? Do you have any final things? I know I interrupted you. Any final things you want to say, Dr. Barker?
No, that's it. I'm willing to share my slides. I'm willing.
We had some requests for them, so if you could
Okay.
email them to us, that would be terrific.
Yeah.
If there aren't any questions, just a few, again, things to wrap up. If this is your 3rd STAR lecture that you've attended, you can go ahead and write your STAR lecture paper now, and you would email it to the EMU honors at emish email. I also want to invite all of you to come to the 5th in our February lecture. It is a little earlier in the month than we've been using. It's going to be on February 11th. The speaker is Dr. William White, who's coming from University of Michigan. And a couple of things. His talk is entitled Indigenous and Peoples and Climate Justice, Global Movements and Contributions to Migration and Adaptation. So he's talking about environmental justice. But I want you to note a couple things that are different. Because in February, we're collaborating with the College of Arts and Sciences McCandless professorship. This talk on the 11th will not be in Sill Hall. It will not be on Zoom. It will be at 5 p.m., not later than that, 5 p.m. in Strong Hall 100. And I hear there will be snacks. So that's another little thing to invite you to come. I'd like to invite all of you to join me in thanking Dr. Barker for her lecture. You can thank her in the chat. You can give her a little applause in your screen.
And
The next one,
Elizabeth had the question.
Dr. Cornett, Andrew, is the next one going to also be on Zoom? I don't see him. No way.
I'm here. It
Is
will
it on
not.
Zoom? It
It's
will
not
not
going to
be
be
on
on
Zoom.
Zoom,
So
just in
that
person.
one you have to attend in person because they don't have the capability in Zoom. And somebody else asked, you do not write 3 papers for 3 lectures. You write 1 paper on all 3. So you cannot write the paper until you attend 3 lectures. 1 paper on all 3 because you're supposed to talk about what you learned from the 3 and what did you see, how did the theme together, how together did they inform your sense of the topic.
And
I
thank
think
you
that,
so much for your
okay.
attention. And hopefully you learned 1 or 2 things today.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Barker.
All right. Bye, guys.